Hey guys, today we're looking at the HL content for section 3.1, International Trade. In this video, we will only focus on absolute and comparative advantage, and the remaining content, calculating the effects of a tariff, quotas, and subsidies to local producers, will be covered in the next video. Here we show the production possibilities of two countries, Australia and China. To be clear, this means that if Australia allocates all its resources to lamb, it can make 9 kilos and 0 cloth. And if it allocates all its resources to cloth, it can make 4 meters and no lamb. So Australia can produce 9 kilos of lamb or 4 meters of cloth, or a combination in between these values. We assume that both countries have the same resources. Therefore, we can see that Australia has the absolute advantage in producing lamb, and China has the absolute advantage in producing cloth. We can also calculate the opportunity cost for each country of making 1 kilo of lamb. This will be useful later. The equation is as follows. The opportunity cost of one more unit of good A equals the total good B possible divided by total good A possible. Following that through, the opportunity cost of 1 kilo of lamb equals total cloth possible divided by total lamb possible, which equals, for Australia, 4 over 9, 0.44. We must remember here that this assumes constant opportunity cost. The PPCs will be straight lines rather than the bowed out curves that you'll remember that we mostly used. So I want you to stop here and plot these PPCs using straight lines on one PPC diagram, just to test if you remember how. Okay, so here they are. Now we can tell already that there is reciprocal absolute advantage because the two PPCs intersect each other. Let's have a look at how much each country might produce and consume with closed economies, no trade. For ease, we'll assume half of each country's resources are going into each good. So Australia would make 4.5 kilos of lamb and 2 meters of cloth, and China would make 3 kilos of lamb, 3 meters of cloth. Of course, each country could produce at any point on or within its PPC. We want to see the benefits of trade, so now we'll look at how much will be produced if they each specialise according to their absolute advantage. Australia would make 9 kilos of lamb, no cloth, and China would make no lamb and 6 meters of cloth. How would they know how much to trade each good for? Think back to opportunity cost. Australia must receive more than 0.44 meters of cloth for a kilo of lamb, otherwise they might as well make it themselves. And China need to give up less than 1 meter of cloth to get a kilo of lamb. Why would they trade 1 meter of cloth for 1 kilo of lamb when that is their local opportunity cost? We'll go somewhere in the middle and say that 1 kilo of lamb equals 0.75 meters of cloth. So now China and Australia are trading. Australia trades away 3 kilos of lamb and receives 2.25 meters of cloth. It is vital to note that this is a better deal for Australia than being closed. China trades away 2.25 meters of cloth and receives 3 kilos of lamb. Again, this is a better return than they could have expected by rearranging their local production. So if you look back, Australia in a closed economy would have had to foregoing 3 kilos of lamb would have only gained them 1.32 meters of cloth. But now they get 2.25. So both countries have gained for this trade. This is reflected in the total consumption. 9 kilos of lamb and 6 meters of cloth compared to closed economies, 7.5 kilos of lamb, 5 meters of cloth. Also, it can be seen in the PPC. Each country is now producing outside of its own PPC. This is not possible without trade. Moving on to comparative advantage, we'll consider another set of data. France and Poland making wine and cheese. If we again assume that they have the same quantity of resources, we see that France has an absolute advantage in wine. They can make 3 litres while Poland make 1, and also in cheese. They can make 4 kilos compared to Poland's 3. Immediately, you might think France is better at making both. Why would they trade? But the answer lies in comparative advantage. A country has comparative advantage if it can produce the good at a lower opportunity cost than another country. So we can work out this opportunity cost. So I want you to stop now and work out the opportunity cost for each country of producing a litre of wine and also the opportunity cost for producing a kilo of cheese. So here are the answers, and we've derived them using the formula that the opportunity cost of one more unit of good A equals to the total amount of good B possible over the total amount of good A possible. So we see that France has comparative advantage in making wine because it's got the lower opportunity cost, and Poland has a comparative advantage in making cheese because it's got the lower opportunity cost. There's a trick to tell from a glance in which good France has the comparative advantage. We just look at the distance between the PPCs on that axis. The stronger nation, France, has comparative advantage of the good with the largest gap between PPCs. So this is wine. This will always hold, so you can use that as a double check of your opportunity cost calculations. Given this, we can surmise that when the PPCs are parallel to each other, there is no comparative advantage, and therefore no benefit from trade. Alright, let's have a look at how much each country might produce and consume with closed economies. No trade. Again, for ease, we'll assume half of each country's resources are going into each good. So France has 1.5 litres of wine, 2 kilos of cheese. Poland has half a litre of wine and 1.5 kilos of cheese. Of course, again, these are examples. Each country could produce at any point on or within its PPC. We want to see the benefits of trade, so now we'll look at how much will be produced if they each specialise, where they have comparative advantage. France would make 3 litres of wine, no cheese. Poland would make no wine, 3 kilos of cheese. How do they know how much to trade each good for? Again, think back to opportunity cost. France must receive more than 1.33 kilos of cheese for a litre of wine. Otherwise, they might as well make it themselves. And Poland need to give up less than 3 kilos of cheese to get 1 litre of wine. We'll go somewhere in the middle and say that 1 litre of wine is traded for 2 kilos of cheese. If you're unsure of these numbers, try yourself to plug in numbers outside of the parameters and see what happens. So now Poland and France are trading. France trades 1 litre of wine to get 2 kilos of cheese. Compare France's consumption in the open economy to how they went in the closed economy. They're better off due to trade. Poland trades 2 kilos of cheese to get a litre of wine. Again, this is a better return than they could have expected by rearranging their local production. Both countries have gained from trade. The visual aspect of this is powerful. Both countries operating outside or consuming outside their own PPCs. They're using the different skills and resources of their neighbours to make themselves better off, consuming more than they could have without trade. We're going to now look at where you get comparative advantage from. It's often based on a country's endowments, which factors of production they are endowed with. For example, Australia is endowed with large amounts of grazing land, therefore has comparative advantage in production of beef. And China is endowed with a large population of unskilled workers, and therefore has comparative advantage in labour-intensive manufacturing. Singapore is endowed with a well-educated labour force, and therefore have comparative advantage in financial services. The Dutch economist David Ricardo, this guy over here, is widely seen as the father of the theory of comparative advantage. It has been crucial in promoting trade around the world. However, it has its limitations. So, of course, you will be expected to be able to evaluate the underlying assumptions of the theory. So here we go. Firstly, perfect knowledge is assumed. Both producers and consumers are aware of where the least expensive goods can be purchased. countries know when they should produce certain goods and when they should trade for them. This is a big assumption and so limits the real-life usefulness of the theory. You might have noticed that transport costs were ignored in our earlier analysis. It can be expensive to ship bottles of wine around the world. These costs diminish the benefits of specialization. Does the real world only have two countries that each produce only two goods? The answer is no. But economists, so this does diminish the usefulness again of the theory, but now economists can use sophisticated computer simulations to include multiple countries and multiple products, so we are getting over this one. There's also no mention of any trade protection in the examples I used. Once it is realized that Poland has a 50% tariff on imported wine, it might not be so advantageous for the countries to specialize. And while it may hold that commodities are equal, that is, price should be the only determining factor as to whether Australia buys oil from Venezuela or Saudi Arabia, this does not hold for all goods. Consider computers. One country may make them cheaper, but if the quality differs, can we really claim that this country has comparative advantage? Capital and labour, they move frequently between countries. Labour often migrates from low-wage to high-wage countries. E.g., an Afghani may migrate to Australia and send wages home to support their family. Or, a multinational company may invest their capital machinery in a developing country to produce the good there. This implies that the comparative advantages are not static, that they in fact change over time. Also, full employment does not happen. In our analysis, we saw the economies operating on the PPC, and that indicates that all available resources were being utilised. This is not realistic. Specialisation, even with comparative advantage, is not always the best option for a country. A strong comparative advantage may make it seem that a country should almost completely specialise in one good. The problem is that this leaves the country vulnerable. If the world price for this good, usually a commodity, falls, the entire economy can fall over. This can be a particular risk for developing countries. Imports and exports do not balance neatly. We have seen that all this trading is very clean and everyone wins, but this is not the case. Many countries import much more than they export, and vice versa. Now remember, a full discussion on comparative advantage should ideally take in arguments that you've already learnt about the pros and cons of trade. Alright, make sure that you fully understand absolute and comparative advantage, and we will go through some exercises in class.